What happens when loyalty turns into love? And what if that love changes everything? Pause for a moment and think about it. In a world where power defines relationships, where masters command and servants obey, could something as fragile as love ever take root? Could it grow strong enough to break down walls of authority, tradition, and fear? Today, we're diving into a story that answers these questions, a tale so compelling, it forces us to rethink the boundaries of ambition, vulnerability, and transformation. This is the story of a servant who began as nothing more than a shadow in their master's life. At first glance, they were just another face in the crowd, someone whose purpose was to serve without question, to exist without being noticed. But beneath that quiet exterior lay a heart full of passion, dreams, and an unshakable determination to rise above their circumstances. It's also the story of a master, powerful, respected, yet deeply lonely. Someone who ruled with authority but carried a secret ache no one else could see. Their relationship started like any other: orders given, tasks completed, silence maintained. The servant followed every instruction with precision, earning trust but never truly stepping out of the shadows. Yet, behind closed doors, this servant harbored a secret dream, a longing not just for freedom, but for connection. For meaning, for a chance to prove themselves worthy of more than servitude. But here's the twist. What began as obedience slowly transformed into something far greater. Through small acts of kindness, unexpected moments of courage, and a relentless pursuit of excellence, the servant began to capture their master's attention, and eventually, their heart. This wasn't just a shift in power dynamics, it was a journey of mutual discovery, where two people from opposite sides of the spectrum found common ground in the most unlikely way. Why does this story matter? Because it speaks to all of us. Haven't we all felt invisible at some point in our lives? Haven't we all yearned to be seen, valued, and understood for who we truly are? This isn't just a historical or fictional narrative, it's a mirror reflecting our own struggles and desires. By the end of this video, you'll understand how even the smallest actions can lead to monumental change. You'll learn how passion and dedication can transcend barriers, and why vulnerability might just be the key to unlocking your greatest potential. And trust me, there's more to this story than meets the eye. As we unfold each layer, you'll uncover hidden truths, surprising twists, and lessons that will stay with you long after the video ends. So, if you've ever wondered whether it's possible to rewrite your destiny, or if love can truly conquer all, you won't want to miss what comes next. Before we dive deeper, let me welcome you to our channel. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button because we're all about bringing you stories that inspire, challenge, and transform the way you see the world. Every video is crafted to take you on a journey, one that leaves you feeling informed, entertained, and maybe even a little inspired to chase your own dreams. So, buckle up, we're about to step into a world where loyalty becomes love, where obedience turns into passion, and where a servant dares to dream bigger than anyone thought possible. But little did anyone know, this servant had plans no one could predict. Stay tuned, because the best is yet to come. At first glance, the master seemed untouchable. A figure of authority, cloaked in wealth and influence, they commanded respect with every step they took and every word they spoke. Their presence filled rooms, not just physically, but emotionally. People didn't merely notice them, they felt them. Yet beneath this veneer of power lay a life far more complex than anyone could have guessed. To understand how a servant would one day unravel their carefully constructed world, we must first look closer at who this master truly was. The master wasn't born into greatness, it was earned. Rising from humble beginnings, they clawed their way to the top through sheer determination and an unrelenting drive for success. Every decision they made was calculated, every move strategic. They had sacrificed friendships, family ties, and even parts of themselves to reach where they were now. And while society hailed them as a beacon of achievement, few knew the cost of their ambition. Loneliness clung to them like a shadow, invisible to outsiders but ever present to those who dared to look closely. Their personality reflected this duality. On the surface, they were charismatic, commanding, and fiercely intelligent. Conversations with them were sharp exchanges, leaving others feeling both impressed and slightly intimidated. But behind closed doors, cracks began to show. The same intensity that fueled their success also isolated them. They struggled to trust, quick to dismiss emotions as weaknesses and vulnerability as a liability. Relationships were transactional. People existed to serve a purpose, not to form connections. Even those closest to them often felt like pawns on a chessboard, moved around at will without regard for their feelings or desires. Take, for instance, the time when one of their most loyal advisors, a man who had stood by their side for decades, approached them with concerns about overworking. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he had said gently, his voice tinged with concern. Instead of gratitude, the master responded with cold indifference. "If you can't handle the pace, perhaps it's time you stepped aside," they replied, their tone cutting like a blade. The advisor left the room silently, stunned by the dismissal. It wasn't personal. It rarely was with the master, but that was precisely the problem. To them, everyone was expendable, including those who cared the most. This mindset extended to how they viewed servants. Servants weren't people to the master, they were tools. Objects designed to carry out tasks, maintain order, and ensure their comfort. Rarely did they acknowledge their humanity, let alone engage with them beyond issuing commands. Meals arrived on schedule, clothes were pressed to perfection, and floors gleamed under their feet, all thanks to the unseen hands of those who worked tirelessly behind the scenes. But these efforts went unnoticed, taken for granted as if they simply happened on their own. Yet, despite their outward confidence, there was something undeniably fragile about the master. Beneath their polished exterior hid a deep-seated fear of losing control. Control over their empire, control over their reputation, and perhaps most importantly, control over themselves. This fear manifested in subtle ways. For example, they insisted on personally approving every detail of their household operations, no matter how trivial. From the placement of furniture to the exact temperature of their tea, nothing escaped their scrutiny. It wasn't just perfectionism, it was a desperate attempt to impose order on a chaotic world. But even the strongest walls can crumble under the right pressure. And unbeknownst to the master, that pressure was already building. Somewhere within their vast estate, among the countless faces that passed through their halls each day, a servant was quietly observing. Watching, learning. This servant saw not just the master's power, but their pain, the loneliness masked by arrogance, the longing hidden behind authority. Where others saw only dominance, this servant saw vulnerability. And, where others saw barriers, this servant saw opportunities. Even so, the master remained oblivious, for now. Their focus was fixed firmly on maintaining their image, protecting their legacy, and ensuring that nothing disrupted the delicate balance they had built. Little did they know, a storm was brewing, one that would challenge everything they believed about themselves and the world around them. As days turned into weeks, small moments began to chip away at their defenses. Perhaps it was the way the servant anticipated their needs before they voiced them, or the quiet resolve in their eyes during rare encounters. Whatever it was, the master couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was beginning to change the rhythm of their life. But why, and to what end? The truth was, the master's isolation wasn't just a consequence of their choices, it was a prison of their own making. And prisons, no matter how fortified, always have weak points. All it takes is one crack, one moment of connection, to bring the entire structure crashing down. For the master, that moment was closer than they realized. In the sprawling estate where shadows stretched long across marble floors, there lived a servant whose name was rarely spoken aloud. To most, they were simply the help, a faceless figure who blended seamlessly into the background of their master's opulent life. Yet, beneath this veil of anonymity burned a quiet fire, a flicker of defiance that refused to be extinguished no matter how hard they tried to suppress it. The servant had not always been here. Their journey began in a small village miles away, nestled between rolling hills and endless fields of wheat. Life there was simple but harsh, marked by early mornings spent tending crops and late nights huddled around a meager fire. They were born into poverty, their family struggling to make ends meet while dreams of something greater lingered just out of reach. From an early age, the servant learned the value of hard work, not as a choice, but as a necessity for survival. When opportunity knocked, or rather, when desperation forced them to answer, they left everything behind to seek employment in the city. The transition wasn't easy. The bustling streets, towering buildings, and constant noise overwhelmed them at first. But necessity has a way of dulling fear, and soon enough, they found themselves standing at the gates of the master's estate, clutching a letter of recommendation written hastily by a distant relative. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one they hoped would lead to stability, if not fulfillment. At first glance, the servant seemed perfectly suited to their role. Obedient, efficient, and unassuming, they carried out their duties with precision, never complaining, never faltering. Meals were served on time, linens were folded neatly, and every corner of the house gleamed under their care. To the other servants, they appeared content, perhaps even too content, with their lot in life. But appearances can be deceiving. Beneath their calm exterior churned a sea of untapped potential, hidden dreams, and unanswered questions. What few realized was that the servant harbored talents far beyond what their position demanded. In stolen moments during the night, when the world outside fell silent and the estate slept, they would retreat to their tiny room and let their true self emerge. There, illuminated only by the soft glow of a candle, they sketched intricate designs on scraps of paper, composed melodies that danced through the air like whispers, or strategized imaginary battles with startling clarity. These acts of creation weren't mere hobbies. They were lifelines, reminders of who they truly were beneath the weight of servitude. Yet, despite their gifts, the servant kept these parts of themselves hidden. Fear held them back, a paralyzing fear of rejection, ridicule, or worse, punishment. They knew all too well the risks of stepping outside the lines society had drawn for them. Servants were meant to serve, not to shine. So, they buried their passions deep within, allowing only fleeting glimpses to surface when solitude granted them temporary freedom. Their daily struggles added another layer of complexity to their existence. Each day brought its own challenges, grueling hours, relentless demands, and the ever-present pressure to remain invisible. Mistakes were met with sharp reprimands, and praise was virtually non-existent. Still, the servant persevered, driven by a quiet determination that stemmed from somewhere deep inside. They told themselves it was enough to endure, to survive, but secretly, they yearned for more. More than routine, more than obedience, more than invisibility. They longed to matter. It was during one such ordinary moment that something extraordinary happened. While tidying up the master's study, a task they performed countless times before, the servant noticed something unusual. A book lay open on the desk, its pages filled with hurried scribbles and crossed-out words. At first glance, it seemed insignificant, just another piece of clutter awaiting removal. But as they leaned closer, curiosity got the better of them. The writing revealed fragments of poetry, raw, emotional verses that spoke of longing, regret, and isolation. It was unlike anything they expected from the master, whose demeanor suggested someone immune to such vulnerabilities. For the first time, the servant paused to consider the person behind the title. Until now, they had seen the master only as an authority figure, someone to obey without question. But this glimpse into their private thoughts shattered that perception. Here was evidence of a soul wrestling with emotions far more complex than anger or arrogance. For the first time, the servant saw not just a master, but a human being. This revelation sparked a curiosity they couldn't ignore. Who was this person, really? What drove them to pour their innermost feelings onto paper, only to hide them away in a locked drawer? And why did they seem so determined to keep others at arm's length? Questions swirled in the servant's mind, each one pulling them further into a web of intrigue they hadn't anticipated. As days passed, they began to observe the master more closely, not out of obligation, but out of genuine interest. They noticed the subtle changes in expression when the master thought no one was watching. They caught glimpses of hesitation in their commands, flashes of uncertainty in their eyes. These observations didn't soften their resolve to rise above their circumstances, instead, they fueled it. If the master could harbor such depth beneath their polished exterior, then perhaps the servant could too. Perhaps they weren't as powerless as they believed. Little by little, the servant started taking small risks. They lingered a moment longer in the study, pretending to dust while sneaking peeks at the books lining the shelves. They listened intently during conversations, picking up on nuances they might have missed before. And though they remained outwardly obedient, inwardly, they felt a shift, a stirring of courage they hadn't known existed. But courage comes with consequences, and the servant couldn't shake the feeling that their growing curiosity was dangerous. Dangerous not because it might get them caught, but because it threatened to blur the lines they had worked so hard to maintain. Lines between servant and master, duty and desire, reality and possibility. Each step forward felt like walking a tightrope, balancing precariously between safety and risk. Yet, for reasons they couldn't fully explain, they couldn't bring themselves to turn back. The truth was, the servant's awakening wasn't just about discovering the master, it was about rediscovering themselves. They had spent so long suppressing their identity, conforming to expectations, and burying their dreams that they had almost forgotten what it meant to feel alive. But now, with every observation, every stolen moment of insight, they felt pieces of themselves coming back together. And yet, the tension grew. With each passing day, the servant found it harder to reconcile the two sides of their existence, the dutiful servant bound by rules, and the dreamer yearning to break free. Something had shifted irrevocably, not just in how they viewed the master, but in how they viewed themselves. It was a day like any other, or so it seemed at first. The estate buzzed with its usual rhythm, servants moving silently through corridors, their footsteps muffled by thick carpets. Outside, the sky stretched white and gray, heavy with clouds that promised rain but held back just long enough to keep everyone guessing. Inside, the master sat in their study, poring over documents scattered across the desk like fallen leaves after a storm. Their brow furrowed as they worked, frustration simmering beneath the surface. Something wasn't right. Numbers didn't add up, plans unraveled, and patience wore thin. Meanwhile, the servant went about their duties with practiced efficiency. They had already cleaned the dining hall, polished the silverware, and ensured every room was immaculate. Now, they approached the study cautiously, balancing a tray laden with tea and biscuits, a small gesture meant to offer solace during what appeared to be a trying afternoon. But this visit would prove anything but ordinary. As they entered, the servant noticed immediately that something was wrong. Papers lay crumpled on the floor, chairs pushed askew, and the air carried an unmistakable tension. The master glanced up briefly, their expression unreadable yet undeniably weary. Without being asked, the servant set the tray down gently, careful not to disturb the fragile silence. They hesitated for a moment before speaking, their voice soft but steady. "Would you like me to help organize these?" They offered, gesturing toward the chaotic mess of papers. It was a bold move, one they might have never dared before. But something about the master's demeanor, the exhaustion etched into their face, the faint tremor in their hands, compelled them to act. The master looked up sharply, surprise flickering in their eyes. "Help, you think you can fix this?" Their tone was sharp, almost dismissive, yet there was a hint of curiosity beneath the skepticism. "I don't know if I can fix it," the servant replied honestly, meeting the master's gaze without flinching. "But I can try." For a moment, neither of them moved. The weight of the servant's words hung in the air, daring to challenge the rigid boundaries between them. Then, slowly, the master nodded. "Fine, do what you must." What followed was nothing short of remarkable. The servant began sorting through the papers with a precision that bordered on artistry. Where others might have seen chaos, they found patterns, connections hidden within the clutter. With each passing minute, the pile grew smaller, more organized, until finally, clarity emerged from confusion. The master watched in stunned silence, their initial skepticism giving way to something else entirely. When the task was complete, the servant straightened, brushing imaginary dust from their sleeves. "There," they said simply, stepping back to reveal the newly ordered desk. "It's better now." The master stared at the transformation, then at the servant, their expression unreadable. Finally, they spoke. "Why did you do that?" The question caught the servant off guard. For a heartbeat, they considered lying, to say it was duty, obligation, or some other safe excuse. But instead, they chose honesty. "Because I thought it was the right thing to do." The simplicity of the answer struck a chord deep within the master. There was no pretense, no ulterior motive, just raw sincerity. In that moment, something shifted. The servant wasn't just a nameless figure anymore. They were someone capable of seeing beyond orders, someone who understood instinctively when to step forward and when to hold back. Over the next few days, the master found themselves observing the servant more closely. Small moments stood out now, things they had overlooked before, like the way the servant anticipated their needs without being told, or how they always seemed to know exactly which book to retrieve from the library shelves. Once, During a particularly tense meeting with advisors, the servant had quietly slipped a glass of water onto the table beside the master, their timing impeccable. No one else noticed, but the master felt it, a gesture so subtle yet profoundly comforting. One evening, as twilight painted the horizon in hues of orange and purple, the master summoned the servant to the garden. This alone was unusual. The master rarely sought out anyone's company, let alone a servant's. When the servant arrived, they found the master standing by the fountain, gazing pensively at the water rippling under the fading light. "You've been here for some time now," the master began, their voice softer than usual. "Tell me, why did you come here?" The question startled the servant. Few people ever cared about their story, let alone someone like the master. Hesitating only briefly, they answered truthfully. "I came because I needed work. Because my family depended on me. But," they paused, weighing their words carefully. "But I stayed because I wanted to learn. To grow." The master turned to face them, their expression thoughtful. "And have you learned, grew?" The servant smiled faintly, though there was a sadness in their eyes. "Maybe. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever truly belong anywhere." Something in the master stirred at those words, perhaps recognition, perhaps regret. Whatever it was, it lingered, unspoken yet palpable. For the first time, they saw the servant not as a tool, but as a person with dreams, fears, and untapped potential. Someone who, despite their circumstances, refused to give up on themselves. This newfound connection wasn't without its risks, however. As the weeks passed, their interactions became more frequent, more meaningful. Conversations that once revolved around tasks and schedules began to delve into topics neither had expected. Books they had read, places they had dreamed of visiting, ideas that sparked debates late into the night. Each exchange brought them closer, breaking down walls that had stood firm for years. But with closeness came danger. Servants weren't supposed to engage with masters as equals, it defied the natural order of things. Other servants whispered behind closed doors, their curiosity tinged with envy. Advisors frowned, warning the master against allowing such familiarity. Society itself loomed large, ready to judge harshly should their relationship cross invisible lines. Still, neither could deny the pull they felt toward each other. For the servant, it was validation, a chance to be seen for who they truly were. For the master, it was hope, a reminder that even the loneliest hearts could find companionship. Yet, both knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. One evening, as the two stood side by side, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, the master broke the silence. "Do you ever feel trapped?" they asked suddenly, their voice barely above a whisper. The servant hesitated, unsure how to respond. "Sometimes," they admitted finally. "But I've learned to dream anyway." "Dreams are free, aren't they?" The master chuckled softly, though there was a wistfulness in their laugh. "Not always. Sometimes they cost everything." Their gazes met, and for a fleeting moment, the world around them seemed to fade away. Neither spoke, but the unspoken promise between them was clear. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. But this newfound connection came with risks neither of them anticipated. As the bond between master and servant deepened, so too did the challenges they faced, from within themselves, from those who sought to tear them apart, and from the very foundations of the world they inhabited. The bond between the master and the servant grew stronger with each passing day, like ivy climbing a stone wall, fragile yet determined, seeking cracks to anchor itself. What had started as fleeting moments of connection blossomed into something deeper, more profound. They began sharing pieces of themselves that no one else had ever seen. Secrets whispered in hushed tones, dreams sketched out under starlit skies, vulnerabilities laid bare without fear of judgment. For the first time, both felt truly understood. Yet, even as their trust deepened, shadows began to gather at the edges of their newfound closeness. The estate, once a silent witness to their quiet interactions, now seemed alive with whispers. Doors creaked open just enough for curious eyes to peer through. Conversations paused mid-sentence when they entered a room. It wasn't long before the weight of those watching eyes pressed down on them, testing the fragile thread that bound them together. At dinner one evening, the tension was almost palpable. The long mahogany table gleamed under the flickering light of chandeliers, its surface adorned with silverware polished to perfection. Servants moved silently around the perimeter, refilling glasses and clearing plates, their movements choreographed to precision. Yet beneath this veneer of order simmered an undercurrent of unease. The master sat at the head of the table, flanked by advisors and distant relatives who rarely visited but always appeared when trouble brewed. Their sharp eyes darted between the master and the servant, dissecting every glance, every word exchanged. The servant stood nearby, hands clasped tightly behind their back, trying not to betray the storm raging inside. "Tell me," one advisor said casually, his tone laced with thinly veiled suspicion, "how is it that you've managed to keep things running so smoothly lately?" He directed the question at the master, though his gaze lingered pointedly on the servant. The master stiffened imperceptibly, setting down their fork with deliberate care. "Efficiency speaks for itself," they replied coolly, their voice steady despite the rising heat in their chest. "I see no reason to question success." The advisor smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Indeed, but some might wonder if distractions are influencing priorities." His words hung heavy in the air, a challenge cloaked in politeness. For a split second, the servant met the master's eyes across the room. There was a flicker of defiance there, a silent promise that neither would back down. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by the hum of forced conversation as others chimed in to fill the awkward silence. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the house fell quiet, the servant lingered in the study while the master reviewed documents. Neither spoke for a while, the only sound the soft scratch of pen against paper. Finally, the servant broke the silence. "They're watching us," they said softly, their voice barely audible over the crackling fire. "Do you think they know?" The master set the pen down and sighed, rubbing their temples. "They suspect. That's all they need to cause trouble. And what will you do?" The servant hesitated, their fingers tracing the edge of the desk. "If they demand answers." The master looked up, their expression unreadable. "I won't let them dictate my choices. Not anymore." But the resolve in their voice didn't match the uncertainty clouding their eyes. Both knew the stakes were higher than either dared admit. Meanwhile, among the other servants, jealousy festered like an untreated wound. Once invisible, the servant now commanded attention, not just from the master, but from everyone. Their name buzzed through corridors, whispered in tones ranging from admiration to resentment. "Why does they get special treatment?" muttered one maid during breakfast, her voice dripping with bitterness. "We all work just as hard, don't we?" Another shrugged, though there was a glint of mischief in their eyes. "Maybe it's not about work. Maybe it's something else entirely." Rumors spread like wildfire, twisting truths until even the most innocent interaction became fodder for gossip. A lingering glance turned into a secret tryst, a shared laugh morphed into scandalous betrayal. Even those who initially admired the servant began to distance themselves, wary of being caught in the crossfire. One afternoon, as the servant carried a tray of tea to the master's chambers, a fellow servant deliberately bumped into them, spilling hot liquid onto their sleeve. "Oops," the offender sneered, feigning innocence. "Clumsy me." The servant winced, clutching their arm, but said nothing. Instead, they continued on their way, their jaw clenched tight. Inside, anger simmered alongside shame, a toxic cocktail of emotions they couldn't afford to unleash. Internal conflicts gnawed at both the master and the servant, pulling them in opposite directions. For the servant, guilt clawed at their conscience. Hadn't they sworn loyalty to the household? To serve without question, without expectation. Every stolen moment with the master felt like a betrayal, not just of their role, but of everything they had worked so hard to achieve. They wrestled with doubt late into the night, staring at the ceiling as questions swirled endlessly in their mind. Was it selfish to want more? To dream of a life beyond servitude? And what of the master? Did they truly care, or was this merely another fleeting indulgence? For the master, the struggle was equally fraught. Duty weighed heavily on their shoulders, a constant reminder of the responsibilities they owed to family, legacy, and society. Love, or whatever this growing connection could be called, wasn't supposed to factor into the equation. Yet, here it was, stubbornly refusing to be ignored. "You can't keep doing this," an advisor warned during a private meeting, their voice low but urgent. "People talk. Rumors spread. If word gets out, I'm aware of the risks," the master snapped, cutting them off. "But I won't live my life dictated by fear." "Fear?" The advisor leaned forward, their tone sharpening. "This isn't fear, it's reality. You have obligations, expectations, Do you really think throwing caution to the wind will end well? The master stared out the window, their reflection ghostly against the glass. Outside, the garden bloomed in vibrant colors, oblivious to the turmoil within. Perhaps, they murmured finally, some things are worth risking everything for. Late-night conversations became their refuge, moments stolen in the quiet hours when the world slept. They'd sit by the fireplace, knees nearly touching, speaking in hushed tones about hopes and fears, dreams and regrets. The servant recounted tales of their childhood, the fields of wheat swaying like golden waves, the laughter of siblings echoing through narrow streets. In turn, the master shared fragments of their own past, stories of sacrifice and loneliness that painted a picture far different from the polished image they presented to the world. These exchanges were bittersweet, filled with joy and pain intertwined. Each revelation brought them closer, yet also highlighted the vast gulf separating their lives. How could two people from such different worlds ever bridge the divide? One night, as rain pattered gently against the windows, the servant hesitated before voicing a thought that had haunted them for days. What happens if someone finds out about us? The master reached out instinctively, their hand brushing against the servant's before retreating abruptly, as if burned. Then we face it together, they said firmly, though their voice trembled slightly. Whatever comes our way. But even as they spoke, doubt lingered in the air. Could they really withstand the storm brewing on the horizon? Or would the pressure prove too much to bear? Tension reached a breaking point during a formal gathering hosted by the master. Guests filled the grand hall, their laughter mingling with the clink of crystal glasses. The servant moved among them, carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, acutely aware of the scrutiny following their every move. At one point, the master approached, their presence commanding attention. "You've done well tonight," they said quietly, their lips barely moving. "Thank you." The servant nodded, careful to maintain their composure. "It's my duty." "No," the master corrected, their gaze intense. "It's more than that. You make this place feel alive." Before the servant could respond, a guest interrupted, drawing the master away. Left standing alone, the servant felt a pang of longing mixed with dread. How long could they keep pretending? How long before the walls closed in? As the evening wore on, the atmosphere grew increasingly suffocating. Whispers grew louder, glances sharper. One particularly bold guest cornered the servant near the staircase, their smile saccharine but their intent clear. "So," they drawled, "tell me, what's your secret? How does a mere servant capture the master's favor so completely?" The servant froze, their heart pounding. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm them. Then, summoning every ounce of courage, they replied evenly, "Hard work. Nothing more." The guest chuckled, unconvinced. "We'll see how long that lasts." By the time the party ended, exhaustion settled over the estate like a thick fog. The master retreated to their study, visibly drained, while the servant disappeared into the shadows, their thoughts a whirlwind of fear and determination. Will their bond survive these challenges, or will it tear them apart? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. Neither could turn back now. The storm had been brewing for weeks, its dark clouds gathering on the horizon of their fragile world. Whispers grew louder, glances sharper, and the weight of expectation pressed down like an unrelenting hand. Yet, amidst the chaos, the servant felt something shift within them, a quiet resolve that refused to be silenced. They had spent so long walking the line between duty and desire, hiding in the shadows of their own dreams. But now, as tensions reached a breaking point, they knew it was time to step into the light. It began with a single idea, an act so bold, so audacious, that it could either cement their bond with the master or shatter it completely. The thought came to them late one night as they lay awake, staring at the ceiling while rain tapped against the windowpane. What if they could create something extraordinary? Something that would speak for itself, transcending words and silencing critics. It wasn't just about proving their worth anymore, it was about showing the master who they truly were beneath the layers of servitude. For days, the servant worked in secret, stealing moments whenever they could. In the stillness of early mornings, they sketched designs on scraps of parchment, their hands trembling not from fear but from excitement. During quiet afternoons when others assumed they were tending to chores, they gathered materials, bits of fabric, paint, wood, all carefully hidden away in their tiny room. At night, By the flickering glow of a candle, they pieced everything together, pouring their heart into every stitch, every brushstroke, every carved detail. What emerged was nothing short of breathtaking. A tapestry unlike any other, woven with threads of gold and midnight blue, depicting scenes of resilience and hope. Mountains rose defiantly against stormy skies, rivers flowed through barren landscapes, bringing life where none seemed possible. And at the center stood two figures, one cloaked in authority, the other humble yet radiant, their hands reaching toward each other across an invisible divide. It was more than art, it was a declaration, a plea, a promise. On the morning of the unveiling, the servants' nerves threatened to overwhelm them. Their palms were slick with sweat as they carried the rolled-up tapestry to the grand hall, their footsteps echoing ominously in the empty corridor. Would the master understand? Would they see the depth of emotion woven into every fiber? Or would they dismiss it as presumptuous, even reckless? When the master entered the hall, their expression was unreadable. They glanced around, clearly puzzled by the unusual setup. The servant stood nearby, clutching the tapestry tightly, their heart pounding like a drum. Finally, summoning every ounce of courage, they stepped forward. "Master," they said, their voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "This is for you." The master raised an eyebrow, curiosity mingling with suspicion. "For me." Without waiting for permission, the servant unfurled the tapestry, letting it cascade down like a waterfall of color and texture. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, slowly, the master approached, their eyes widening as they took in the intricate details. They traced a finger along the golden threads, their breath catching slightly. What is this?" they asked, their voice barely above a whisper. "It's us," the servant replied simply. "Or rather, who we could be, if we dared to try." The master turned to face them, their expression a mixture of shock, awe, and something deeper, something unspoken. "You made this." They gestured toward the masterpiece before them. "But how? When?" "In stolen moments," the servant admitted. "In pieces of time no one else noticed. Because I needed, to show you that I'm more than what you see. That we are more." Tears welled up in the master's eyes, though they fought to keep them at bay. For the first time, they saw the servant not as someone bound by duty, but as a creator, a dreamer, a force of nature. And in that moment, something within them shifted irrevocably. All the walls they had built to protect themselves crumbled under the weight of this revelation. "This," the master struggled to find the right words. "This changes everything." But just as hope began to bloom, a new obstacle appeared. A sharp knock echoed through the hall, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps. An advisor burst in, his face flushed with urgency. "Master," he exclaimed, his tone clipped. "There's trouble. Word has spread about. Certain rumors. People are talking, demanding answers." The servant's stomach dropped. They had known this day might come, but hearing it spoken aloud made it all too real. The master's jaw tightened, their earlier vulnerability replaced by steely determination. "Let them talk," they said firmly. "I won't hide anymore." The advisor hesitated, clearly unsettled by the response. "You don't understand. This isn't just gossip, it's rebellion. Your family, your peers, they won't stand for it. If you don't distance yourself, they'll tear everything apart." A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the faint rustle of the tapestry swaying gently in the breeze. Both the master and the servant knew the stakes. Standing together meant risking everything, the estate, their reputations, perhaps even their lives. Yet, turning away would mean losing something far greater, the chance to rewrite their story. "We can't let fear dictate our choices," the master declared finally, their voice resolute. "Not this time." The servant nodded, though their heart ached with uncertainty. They had taken a leap of faith, bearing their soul in the hopes of bridging the gap between them. But now, fate loomed large, ready to intervene at any moment. As the advisor stormed out, muttering warnings under his breath, the master turned back to the servant. Their gaze was intense, searching, as if trying to memorize every detail. "Whatever happens next," they said softly, "know that I see you. Truly see you. And I see you," the servant replied, their voice trembling but unwavering. "That's why I did this. Why I'll keep fighting. For both of us." Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, signaling the arrival of a storm that mirrored the turbulence within. Rain began to fall, tapping insistently against the windows like a reminder of the challenges ahead. The tapestry swayed again, its vibrant colors glowing faintly in the dim light. It was a symbol of hope, of defiance, of love, but also of fragility. One misstep, one gust of wind, and it could unravel entirely. Would their love conquer all, or would fate intervene? Only time would tell. But neither was willing to give up without a fight. The storm that had raged outside finally began to subside, its fury giving way to a fragile calm. Inside the grand estate, the air was heavy with anticipation, as if the world itself held its breath, waiting to see what would come next. The master and the servant stood together in the hall, their eyes locked in silent understanding. Between them lay not just the tapestry, a testament to courage and creativity, but also the unspoken promise that they would face whatever came their way side by side. It wasn't easy. The days that followed were fraught with challenges that tested their resolve to its limits. Advisors demanded explanations, family members issued ultimatums. Society, ever quick to judge, whispered behind closed doors, painting their bond as scandalous, unnatural. Yet, through it all, neither faltered. They chose each other, not out of rebellion, but because they had found something rare and precious, a connection that transcended titles, roles, and expectations. For the master, this journey marked a profound transformation. Once consumed by power and control, they now embraced humility in ways they never thought possible. It started small. Moments of vulnerability shared over quiet dinners, gestures of kindness extended to those who served them. But soon, these changes rippled outward, reshaping how they led, how they loved, how they lived. Compassion replaced authority as their guiding principle. They began listening more than commanding, seeing people not as tools but as individuals with dreams and struggles of their own. One evening, during a meeting with advisors, the master stunned everyone by dismissing a proposal that prioritized profit over humanity. "We've built our legacy on strength," they said firmly, "but true strength lies in lifting others up, not tearing them down." The room fell silent, the weight of their words sinking in. For the first time, some began to question whether change, real, lasting change, was possible after all. As for the servant, their transformation was equally remarkable. No longer content to remain invisible, they stepped into the light with newfound confidence. Their talents, once hidden away, became a source of pride rather than shame. They painted murals on the walls of the estate, composed melodies that echoed through its halls, and even offered counsel when decisions needed wisdom beyond strategy. Others noticed too. The servants who had once envied or resented them now looked on with admiration, inspired by their courage to defy convention. But perhaps the most significant shift was within themselves. The servant no longer doubted their worth or feared rejection. They realized that greatness wasn't measured by titles or wealth but by the impact one had on the world, and on those they loved. This realization gave them purpose, a sense of belonging they had longed for their entire life. Together, they tackled lingering questions head-on. When rumors threatened to spiral out of control, they addressed them openly, refusing to let fear dictate their narrative. "Yes," the master admitted during a public gathering, "there is truth to what you've heard. But isn't it better to live authentically, even if it means risking everything, than to hide behind pretense?" The crowd murmured uncertainly, yet many couldn't deny the sincerity in their voice, or the quiet dignity of the servant standing beside them. Even old prejudices began to soften, though slowly and reluctantly. Some still clung to outdated beliefs, unable or unwilling to accept the new reality. But others, those who had witnessed the depth of their bond, found themselves questioning why love should be confined by arbitrary boundaries. Change didn't happen overnight, but seeds of acceptance were planted, taking root in unexpected places. Their relationship transformed not only themselves but also those around them. Servants and masters alike began to rethink their roles, challenging assumptions that had gone unquestioned for generations. Conversations sparked debates. Debates ignited movements. What had started as a personal struggle between two individuals blossomed into a catalyst for broader change. And then there were the quiet moments, the ones that mattered most. Late at night, they'd sit by the fire, talking about the future. The master spoke of dreams they had abandoned long ago, while the servant shared aspirations they had only dared to whisper. Together, they envisioned a world where barriers crumbled under the weight of compassion and understanding. It was a dream neither could have imagined alone, but one they now believed was within reach. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows, casting golden patterns on the floor, the servant approached the master with a smile. "Do you remember when we first met?" they asked, their tone playful yet wistful. The master chuckled softly. "How could I forget? You were so determined to stay invisible. And you were so determined to keep everyone at arm's length." The servant paused, their expression softening. "Look at us now. Look at us indeed," the master replied, reaching out to take their hand. "I never thought I'd find someone who could teach me how to truly live. And I never thought I'd find someone who could help me believe I deserved to." They stood there for a moment, hands intertwined, hearts aligned. Around them, the estate bustled with activity, a reflection of the life they had breathed into its walls. Outside, birds sang, their melodies harmonizing with the gentle rustle of leaves. It was a scene of peace, of harmony, a stark contrast to the chaos that had once threatened to tear them apart. Their story became a symbol, whispered in kitchens and written in letters, passed down from generation to generation. It wasn't just about a master and a servant, it was about the power of love to transcend boundaries, to break chains forged by tradition and fear. It reminded people that even in the darkest times, hope could shine through, illuminating paths previously unseen. Yet, as much as their tale inspired others, it remained deeply personal. For the master and the servant, it was proof that love, true, unwavering love, could conquer anything. Not without scars, not without sacrifice, but with enough determination to make the impossible possible. And so, as the sun set on another day, casting the estate in hues of orange and purple, they walked hand in hand through the garden. Behind them, the tapestry fluttered gently in the breeze, its colors vibrant against the fading light. It was more than art now. It was a legacy, a reminder of where they had been and how far they had come. What makes a story unforgettable? Is it the characters, the plot twists, or the emotions that linger long after the final scene fades? For this tale of a master and a servant who defied convention to find love and purpose, the answer lies in its universal truths, the lessons woven into every moment of courage, vulnerability, and transformation. This isn't just their story, it's ours too. At its heart, this narrative reminds us of the power of authenticity. In a world quick to label and confine, staying true to oneself requires immense bravery. The servant taught us that no matter how invisible we may feel, our dreams have value. Their journey from silence to self-expression shows us that hiding our light doesn't protect us, it diminishes us. And the master's evolution teaches us that humility and compassion aren't weaknesses but strengths that open doors we didn't know existed. Then there's the theme of breaking societal norms. How often do we allow fear of judgment to dictate our choices? Whether it's pursuing a passion, challenging expectations, or forging connections that defy convention, stepping outside prescribed roles can feel like standing on the edge of a cliff. But as this story proves, sometimes the most meaningful leaps are the ones that scare us the most. Love, real, unfiltered love, has a way of shattering barriers, not because it denies reality but because it transcends it. Think about your own life for a moment. Have you ever felt trapped in roles or relationships that no longer serve you? Maybe you've silenced your voice to keep peace, buried your passions to meet expectations, or let fear hold you back from taking risks. If so, remember this: change begins with a single step. It might be small, a decision to speak up, an act of kindness, or simply choosing to believe in yourself, but each step moves you closer to the life you deserve. Courage is another lesson etched deeply into this story. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the willingness to act despite it. Both the master and the servant faced immense pressure, from society, from loved ones, even from themselves. Yet they chose to rise above it, guided by something greater than fear: hope. Hope that their bond could endure. Hope that love could rewrite the rules. Hope that they were worthy of happiness. And perhaps that's the greatest takeaway of all: love itself is revolutionary. It challenges systems, reshapes identities, and dares to imagine a better world. When the master and servant stood together against the tide of criticism and doubt, they weren't just fighting for their relationship, they were fighting for the idea that love knows no boundaries. That it can heal wounds, bridge divides, and spark movements. So, as you reflect on this story, ask yourself, what walls are you ready to break down? What dreams are waiting to be set free? Sometimes, the greatest acts of rebellion are born out of love. They start quietly, almost imperceptibly, but grow into forces that change lives, including our own.